Step off this yacht. Now. The words didn't drift like champagne bubbles. They slammed against the deck like an anchor hitting steel. Every conversation on the upper deck broke mid-sentence. The string quartet missed a note. Even the ocean seemed to hush, holding its breath. She stood in silver hostess, gatekeeper, judge of appearances, arm rigid, finger pointed. The spotlight of the yacht's lanterns caught her stance, making her look less like a greeter and more like a guard at the door of privilege. And in front of her stood him tall, broad-shouldered, skin glowing against the navy of his tailored suit. He hadn't said a word yet, but silence itself was suddenly the loudest presence on deck. The guests, rows of tuxedos and sequined gowns, leaned in. Some smirked, others sipped. It was the kind of crowd that fed on subtle humiliation, mistaking cruelty for class. In that instant, they saw a man to dismiss, not knowing the tide was about to turn. The hostess's clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. "This is an exclusive investor event," she added, voice sharp enough to slice through the laughter scattered around her. "You don't belong here." He didn't blink, didn't argue. His stillness carried more gravity than any protest could. His gaze stayed fixed not on her finger, not on the glassy eyes around them, but on the horizon past the railing, as if the sea itself steadied him. Whispers rippled. "Who invited him?" "Security's coming." He looks lost. Phones rose discreetly, red dots flashing. A young guest near the bar mouthed, "This is crazy," while another chuckled, already typing captions in anticipation of a viral clip. But the man in the center of the storm didn't shift. He let the storm swirl, calm at the eye. His breath was even, his hands loose at his sides, his posture commanding without needing a crown or crest. He had walked into many rooms like this, some colder, some crueler, and learned one truth: silence unsettles, power more than shouting ever will. The hostess stepped closer, perfume trailing like a warning flare. "You heard me. Off, now." Her words tried to push him backwards, but he didn't move. If anything, the yacht itself felt tilted, her voice sliding down, his presence rising up. Around them, the celebration faltered. The golden lights strung across the deck no longer seemed festive. They exposed. The laughter wasn't laughter anymore. It was nervous, static, the sound of people choosing sides without knowing the rules. And then came the voiceover, folding the audience into the moment. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe." These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to him. The camera of the night returned to his face. He inhaled slowly, then raised his head. No panic, no apology, just the kind of composure that made time stretch thin, seconds heavy. She expected fear. Instead, she found reflection. He was a mirror, showing her the ugliness of her own words. And though no one knew it yet, this wasn't just a guest standing on borrowed wood. This was the man who had bought the ocean she thought she guarded. And tonight, the tide was his. The man standing at the center of that golden deck wasn't a stranger to exclusivity. He had received the same invitation every other guest had printed on thick ivory paper, embossed in gold, addressed directly to his name. But unlike the others, he didn't arrive in designer flamboyant. No flash of a custom watch, no loud entourage to announce him. Just himself, dressed in a dark suit, tie knotted with precision, shoes polished but quiet. He could have come in spectacle. He had the wealth for it, the reputation to match. A single call, and he could have had 3 assistants clearing a path, photographers, snapping pictures, executives fawning at his side. Instead, he had chosen to walk alone, blending into the hum of laughter and glass clinks. It wasn't humility, it was intention. Tonight, he wanted to see something, to measure a room without telling the room who he was. The yacht itself was floating theater. 2 decks of polished teak, glass railings, waiters in black bow ties gliding with trays of champagne. The sky was velvet, pricked with stars, while the water below lapped soft against the hull. Every element screamed exclusivity, an unspoken contest of who belonged and who didn't. He knew these contests. He had been through them since his 20s. At 23, he walked into a networking gala in Atlanta, cashing his first real estate check. Security asked if he was lost. At 26, he was told the VIP lounge wasn't for entry-level consultants, even after he'd already acquired 3 properties. At 30, he bought his first stake in a shipping company, only to be mistaken for a driver when he arrived at the shareholder meeting. Over and over, the same script, different rooms, same judgment. And now, decades later, worth more than the yacht and everything docked beside it, here he stood again, this time by choice. He knew what would happen when he walked up the gangway alone, with no name tag flashing his status. He knew the glances, the raised brows, the whispered "he doesn't look like one of us." He had rehearsed their prejudice before they performed it. What they didn't know was that this wasn't just another party. This yacht wasn't merely a rented venue floating under a billionaire's flag. It belonged to a company he had quietly invested in, a company whose future he could shape with a signature, and still he didn't lead with that. He stepped aboard as though he were any other guest, because real power doesn't demand recognition, it observes. It waits. He carried nothing but a slim leather wallet and the calm weight of patience. No one escorted him, no one announced him. He had no need. His presence was enough, even if they refused to see it. When the hostess spotted him near the bar, her eyes narrowed the way a scanner narrows on a forged bill. She didn't see invitation inked in gold. She saw someone she decided didn't fit the portrait. In her world, clothes measured value, and skin filtered entry. He felt the shift before she spoke, the tightening circle of stares, the subtle way conversations bent around him like wind around a pillar. He had felt it 100 times before. It didn't surprise him. It didn't wound him. It confirmed everything he already knew about how fragile these rooms really were. This wasn't his first test. It wouldn't be his last. But tonight, the results wouldn't belong to him alone. They would belong to everyone watching, guests with raised glasses, strangers behind phone cameras, the thousands who would see this moment replayed online. For now, though, he stood silent, a man with nothing flashy in hand, yet carrying the kind of weight that made silence louder than champagne toasts. The hostess's heels clicked once against the teak, sharp as a gavel striking wood. She stepped closer, her silver gown catching every light, but her expression was colder than the sea air. "This deck is for verified investors only," she said, voice pitched high enough to draw the nearest guests into her authority. "Not for wanderers." The word landed heavy, designed to reduce him to an intruder. Guests nearby glanced at their champagne as if it held an answer. A few chuckled nervously, sipping faster, pretending to be detached, yet leaning closer to the drama. A young server passed with a tray. The hostess stopped him with a snap of her fingers, whispering something sharp. The server's eyes flicked toward the man in the dark suit, then down to the polished deck, as if eye contact itself was dangerous. He pivoted away, carrying the tray toward safer conversations. The hostess pressed her clipboard tighter. "Sir, if you don't present your credentials immediately, we'll have to remove you. These events aren't open to just anyone." The implication twisted like wire. Just anyone. It was enough to feed the whispers now snaking through the crowd. "He doesn't look like an investor. Could be a crasher. Security should handle it." From the edge of the bar, a man in a velvet jacket leaned toward his companion. Betty sneaked in for free drinks. His companion smirked, tugging at diamond cufflinks, neither hiding nor lowering their voices. The music resumed, softer now, a cover for tension. The quartet played, but each note trembled under the weight of spectacle. The CEO didn't move. His stillness was no longer quiet, it was provocation. The hostess glanced around, gauging her audience. The more she escalated, the more she fed her own performance. Power, in her hands, wasn't service. It was theater. She gestured sharply to a man by the staircase, a security guard in black earpiece glowing in the light. He started forward. "Excuse me," the hostess announced louder, as if narrating for the entire deck. "We have a situation here. This gentleman is not on the list." Her words carried over the strings, over the wind, over the sea itself. Guests turned in clusters, faces lit with curiosity and judgment. Some raised their phones higher. The yacht was no longer a party, it was a stage. The guard approached, broad shoulders cutting through the crowd. He didn't touch the man yet, but his presence was an unspoken threat. Guests shifted back, forming a ring. The CEO now stood alone in the center, as if the deck itself were an arena. The hostess's smile was thin, triumphant. "It'll be easier if you leave quietly," she said, but there was no quiet. Not anymore. Every guest was waiting for his answer, every whisper coiling around the silence he refused to break. He inhaled once, steady, unhurried, and though his lips didn't part, the message was clear in his posture. "I've seen this play before. Let it run." The hostess mistook composure for concession. She lifted her chin higher, preparing for the next strike. The guard flexed his hands. The crowd leaned closer. The escalation wasn't finished. It was only beginning. The security guard stopped just a step away, hand hovering near the man's shoulder as if ownership of his body could be claimed with a touch. The hostess folded her arms now, confident, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Do yourself a favor. Walk off before we escort you off." Every syllable was a shove, but he didn't move. Not a flinch, not even a twitch. His stance was rooted, steady as the mast above them. The silence he gave back wasn't empty, it was heavy. The kind of silence that draped itself over music, over chatter, until the only sound left was the restless shifting of designer shoes against the teak. People cleared their throats, pretended to check their watches, but their eyes stayed glued to him. He let the tension build. He always did. It was the same skill that had once saved him in boardrooms where men twice his age mistook calm for weakness. At 29, he sat through an entire negotiation where partners accused him of faking his portfolio. He hadn't defended himself. He had waited. And when the paperwork slid across the table with his name embossed in ink, they folded faster than dominoes. Silence had been his sharpest blade then. It was again now. The hostess tapped her clipboard against her palm, impatient. "Sir, I will not repeat myself." Still, nothing. He simply adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. Slow, deliberate, like time itself answered to him. The guard shifted awkwardly. He'd been trained for resistance, shouts, protests, even threats. But he hadn't been trained for this. A man whose stillness felt like defiance, whose eyes held not fear but endurance. Someone near the bar whispered, "Why isn't he saying anything?" Another muttered, "Maybe he's guilty." Yet a third voice cut back, "Or maybe he's just not entertaining her." There. The air thickened. Phones tilted higher. A woman in a crimson dress raised her glass halfway, then froze, waiting for the drop of a single word that never came. And then the memory flickered his own, sharp and buried. 17 years old, standing in a mall boutique, accused of shoplifting because his hoodie was too baggy. The guard back then had said the same thing, "Make it easy for yourself. Just leave." He had left that day, burning, silent not from strength but from shame. Tonight, the silence was different. It wasn't surrender. It was control. The hostess tried again, sharper. "Security will escort you now." The guard reached, hesitated. The man's gaze met his, and the pause stretched into something undeniable. He didn't speak, but the look said enough. "Touch me, and this deck becomes your mistake." Guests felt it too. The stillness wasn't passive anymore. It was power, waiting to be named. A bead of sweat rolled down the guard's temple, though the night air was cool. He withdrew his hand slightly, caught between orders and instinct. The hostess noticed, bristling. Her authority was slipping, and she knew it. She turned to the crowd, louder now. "This is exactly the problem with uninvited guests. They waste everyone's time." Laughter cracked from one corner, shallow and forced. But the mood was shifting. Some guests exchanged looks, uneasy. Silence wasn't weakness, it was exposing everyone else's noise. The man in the dark suit remained motionless. No need to raise his voice. The room was already shouting for him. From the edge of the crowd, a phone rose higher. The glow of its screen cut through the yacht's golden light like a flare. A young guest, barely 25, blazer too large, Nervous energy in his hands hit record. His voice was low at first, almost to himself. "This doesn't feel right. The words carried, not because he shouted, but because silence had made the deck so brittle that even a whisper could crack it. Heads turned his way. The red dot blinked on his phone, capturing every breath, every narrowed glance, every drip of hostility from the hostess's tongue. The hostess spun toward him, sharp. "Put that away. This is a private event." But the young man didn't lower his phone. His fingers trembled, yes, but his conviction steadied. "Then why does it look like you're throwing out a guest who hasn't said a word?" The question sliced through the deck more effectively than any violin string. For the first time, murmurs shifted direction, not just about him, the silent figure in the suit, but about her. The hostess, the aggressor. At the bar, an older woman with silver hair leaned toward her husband. "Are we sure he's not supposed to be here? He looks calm, too calm." Her husband frowned, sipping his champagne slower now, caught between doubt and spectacle. The security guard's stance faltered, weight shifting uneasily from one foot to the other. The role he was meant to play, enforcer, remover, no longer felt clean under so many eyes, so many lenses. Another guest, a young woman in a green gown, spoke up, her voice barely above the clink of crystal. "I saw him with an invitation earlier. I think he belongs." The hostess snapped back, fast as a whip. "No, you didn't. Don't confuse him with real attendees." But the seed of doubt had been planted. Guests looked at one another, wondering what they had actually seen, what assumptions they had swallowed whole without checking. The man in the suit remained unmoved, silent, but now silence was no longer solitary, it was shared. The camera's eye bore witness. The whispered questions spread like smoke. "What if she's wrong?" The young man with the phone steadied his hand. He spoke louder this time, voice cracking with equal parts fear and courage. "This isn't how you treat someone unless you're hiding something." Gasps, shifts. A ripple of unease ran across the deck. The hostess's jaw tightened. She was losing grip. Authority thrives in shadows. Under a spotlight, it withers. And tonight, that spotlight was a blinking red dot. A waiter froze mid-step, tray hovering in the air, eyes darting between the phone and the silent man. Two men near the rail stopped their laughter, their smirks fading as they replayed the hostess's words in their head. The guard looked to her for orders, but she had no script left except anger. "Turn it off," she barked. The young man's reply was steady now. "Not until I understand why you think he doesn't belong." It was no longer a performance between two figures. The deck itself had joined the scene. Witnesses were awake. The air was charged. The man in the suit still hadn't spoken, but his silence had multiplied into voices not his own. That was always how power revealed itself, not by shouting, but by making the room speak truths it wanted to bury. And tonight, the room was beginning to speak. The murmur of voices grew heavy enough that even the quartet faltered. Their bows scraped strings in uneasy rhythm before falling silent altogether. The party, meant to be a stage for wealth and elegance, had transformed into something else, a tribunal under open sky. And then he appeared, the event manager. Crisp tuxedo, jaw tight, eyes gleaming with the false authority of someone used to being obeyed. He pushed through the cluster of guests, one hand raised as if to part the sea of sequins and silk. "What seems to be the issue?" His tone was polished, but beneath the veneer was irritation, the kind of impatience reserved for people he thought beneath him. The hostess wasted no time. "This man is not on our list. He's disrupting the event." The manager's gaze snapped toward the figure in the dark suit. He didn't ask for an invitation. He didn't request a name. He simply looked, scanned, judged. His lips curled. "Sir, this is a private yacht. Our investors don't arrive unannounced." Still, silence. The CEO stood rooted, unflinching, gaze steady. The manager's irritation sharpened. He leaned closer, his voice louder now, pitched for the surrounding crowd. "I'll save you the embarrassment. This isn't the place for you. Drinks are complimentary for our guests, not for anyone wandering in from the dock." A ripple of laughter broke out from a pair of men near the rail. Forced, cruel. They clinked glasses, complicit in humiliation. But not everyone laughed. The young man with the phone held it higher. The older woman frowned. The woman in the green gown crossed her arms, eyes narrowing on the manager. Doubt was spreading, quiet but real. The manager pressed on, louder, riding his own momentum. We run a high-profile event. Security doesn't need to waste time verifying every outsider who steps on deck. So let's end this here. Leave before you make more of a scene. His words didn't land clean. They hit jagged, sparking more murmurs than applause. A guest whispered, "He hasn't even said anything yet." Another shook his head, muttering, "Why escalate when the man's just standing there?" The CEO adjusted his stance slightly, one small shift, enough to remind the crowd he was unshaken. That micro-movement, that deliberate calm, made the silence heavier than the manager's entire speech. The hostess clung to her authority. "Call security again. Have him escorted out." But the guard still hesitated. Too many eyes. Too many cameras. His training hadn't prepared him for moral weight. The manager, flushed with anger, jabbed a finger toward the silent man. "You're done here. No drinks. No access. No place on this yacht. Do you understand?" He did not answer. Not with words. But his eyes met the manager's, calm and unyielding, and for the first time a flicker of unease cracked the man's composure. Guests shifted. The tide was turning, though neither hostess nor manager could feel it yet. They thought they were pressing him down. In truth, they were burying themselves deeper, every insult logged not only in memory but now in pixels and whispers that would outlive the night. And still the CEO stood in silence. The manager mistook it for weakness, but silence wasn't weakness, it was rope, and they were tying it around their own throats. The manager's voice, already sharp, now cracked under the weight of his own temper. He reached for the glass in the man's hand, a simple flute of champagne, and yanked it away as if snatching evidence from a criminal. The liquid splashed, glittering under the yacht lights before spilling across the deck. Gasps rose like a wave. Even laughter stalled. That single act carried more humiliation than all the words before it. It wasn't just denial of service, it was stripping dignity in front of 100 witnesses. The hostess seized the moment. "Enough. Security, remove him now." Her command rang like a verdict. The guard stepped forward again, closer this time, hand poised to grip the man's arm. The crowd shifted instinctively, some stepping back for safety, others leaning forward with phones raised higher. The deck had become a courtroom, the ocean around it a silent jury. Still he didn't move. Not a flinch, not a plea. Only eyes steady on the horizon. That composure wasn't resistance, it was exposure, forcing every other action to reveal itself in raw form. The manager leaned in, voice venomous, amplified for the crowd. "You think dressing up in a cheap suit gives you a seat at this table? Not tonight, not ever." The insult cut deeper than the spilled champagne. Some guests muttered in disbelief, others shook their heads. A woman whispered, "This feels wrong." "Ugh." The young man with the phone spoke up again, louder this time. "He hasn't even defended himself, and you're calling him cheap? That's not policy, that's bias." The manager spun toward him, face flushed. "Put the phone away before I have you removed." But the tide was shifting. Another voice emerged, a man in a gray blazer near the rail. Why not check the guest list properly? Why humiliate him first? The question hung heavier than the sea air. The manager didn't answer. He couldn't. The hostess tried to salvage control, her voice tight with fury. "Sir, you have 3 seconds before security escorts you off this yacht. 1, 2. The guard's hand finally touched fabric fingers, brushing the sleeve of the man's suit. And that was the spark. The silent figure straightened, not in panic but in warning. His gaze lifted from horizon to guard, then to hostess, then to manager. No words yet, but the shift in air was unmistakable. Guests leaned back as though bracing for a storm. The spilled champagne on the deck caught the lights like broken glass. The scent of salt and sea mingled with tension so thick it felt physical. Phones caught every angle, their red dots recording not just an incident, but a legacy of bias repeating itself once more. The guard hesitated again, but the hostess's voice cracked through. "Now, take him off my deck." That single word might did more damage than she realized. The crowd noticed. Murmurs spread. Her deck? Since when? Who really owns this? The man in the suit finally inhaled, deep and steady. His silence was ending, and with that breath, the night itself began to shift. The security guard's hand lingered on his sleeve, pressure waiting to tighten. The crowd inhaled as one, sensing the moment the silent figure might finally bend or break. But instead, he moved with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this ending long before it began. Slowly, deliberately, he slipped a phone from his inner pocket. The motion wasn't rushed. It wasn't panicked. It was exact, like pulling a key from a lock. He tapped once. A name lit across the screen. His voice, the first words of the night, came low but carried through the hush. Activate protocol. The sound was soft, but it cut sharper than any insult that had preceded it. The hostess froze mid-breath. The manager blinked, as though the script had suddenly flipped to a language he couldn't read. On the other end of the line, a calm voice answered instantly. "Yes, sir. Confirming your location. Horizon Yacht, Deck A." "Yes," he said evenly. "Log this moment. Secure all feeds. Check attendee registry." "Yes, sir. Recording initiated. Internal systems engaged." The guard's hand slipped back as though burned. He didn't understand the words, but he understood authority when he heard it. This wasn't the cadence of someone bluffing. It was the tone of someone who had used these commands before. Gasps rustled through the crowd. A woman whispered, "Who's he talking to?" A man near the bar muttered, "Sounds like corporate." The hostess tried to recover. Her laugh was thin, brittle. "A phone call won't save you. We know a gatecrasher when we see one." He didn't even look her way. His eyes stayed steady on the dark waves just beyond the railing. "Timestamp every insult," he instructed through the phone. "Every denial of service. Archive video evidence. I want full documentation ready." "Yes, sir. Archiving now." The young man with the phone nearly dropped it in shock. "He's logging this? Like, officially?" His camera caught the widening eyes of guests around him, their certainty fracturing. The manager stepped forward, desperate to reclaim authority. "Who exactly do you think you are? Calling someone in the middle of this doesn't change the fact." The man finally turned. Just a fraction, but enough. His gaze locked on the manager, steady, unshaken. "You'll find out soon enough." The words landed like thunder on still water, quiet, but rumbling through every ear, every phone camera, every nervous sip of champagne. The hostess opened her mouth to retort, but for once no words came. The glow of phone screens reflected in her eyes. Her certainty was eroding, replaced by the creeping realization that she had provoked someone whose silence had been strategy, not submission. On the line, the calm voice spoke again. "Would you like me to verify your status with the board, sir?" "Not yet," he said, sliding the phone back into his pocket with deliberate calm. "Let them finish writing their own mistakes." He straightened his cuffs. The guard stepped fully back. The crowd leaned forward. The deck, once heavy with humiliation, now quivered with anticipation. The storm hadn't broken yet, but the winds had shifted. The phone disappeared back into his pocket, but its echo lingered across the deck. For the first time that evening, the man in the dark suit shifted his weight forward, not as a guest being cornered, but as someone reclaiming ground that had always been his. He drew in a breath, lifted his chin, and let his voice spread, calm yet cutting through the night air. "You keep calling this your deck," he said to the hostess, each syllable deliberate, "but it isn't yours. It isn't his either." His gaze flicked to the manager, then swept across the circle of glittering guests. "This yacht belongs to the company I control." The crowd stilled as if the sea itself had gone flat. The hostess blinked, frozen. "That's not possible." Investors, real investors, were vetted. His eyes sharpened, but his tone stayed even. "Check your registry. Look under executive stakeholders. Majority shares. You'll see my name." From the corner, the young man with the phone whispered to his camera, "He just said he owns it." The live stream chat erupted, messages flickering across his screen faster than his eyes could follow. The manager scoffed, desperate, his voice louder now, trembling at the edges. You expect us to believe that? Dressed like what? The CEO's voice cut across his, firm as steel. Like a man who doesn't need your approval to stand where he already belongs. A ripple of gasps followed. A woman in emerald whispered, "He's serious." The CEO stepped closer, just enough for the crowd to feel the gravity shift. You humiliated me on a yacht financed by my own capital. You denied me service at an event funded by my portfolio. And you tried to drag me off a deck I not only belong to, but own. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was collapse. The scaffolding of arrogance the hostess and manager had built cracked in real time, splintering under the truth. Phones lifted higher, faces leaned in. The older woman with silver hair murmured, "Dear God, it's real." The hostess stumbled, voice cracking. "There must be some mistake. He's bluffing." The CEO turned, not to her, not to the manager, but to the witnesses. Mistakes don't survive audits, and everything that happened tonight is already logged, time-stamped, archived. The mistake was yours. The record is mine. The weight of his words was heavier than any hand security could have laid on him. The manager's smirk dissolved into a twitch. He reached for his phone as if scrambling for confirmation. His thumb flew across the screen, then froze. His face drained. Whatever he saw, whatever registry entry flashed before his eyes was undeniable. The murmurs sharpened into exclamations. "It's him. He's on the board. He's the one." The man in the suit didn't raise his voice, didn't gloat. He simply let the truth hang, unshaken, immovable, like an anchor dropped to the ocean floor. And for the first time all night, it wasn't his silence that held the crowd captive. It was his name. The revelation landed like a storm that no one had prepared for. The deck, moments earlier a courtroom stacked against him, now became a gallery of gasps, widened eyes, and trembling hands clutching champagne flutes. The hostess staggered back half a step. Her clipboard, once clutched like a badge of power, slipped against her dress. She opened her mouth, but no words came, only a stammer drowned by the sudden surge of voices. "He owns it? No way, check the list. My God, it's him." Phones rose higher. Screens glowed like lanterns against the night, capturing every flicker of panic across her face. What began as a humiliation had become evidence broadcast in real time to strangers across the world. The manager's complexion drained pale. His phone still sat in his hand, frozen on the digital registry that had confirmed the truth. He tried to hide it, angling the screen away, but two nearby guests had already seen. One pointed, whispering, "It's right there, majority stakeholder." The guard who had nearly grabbed his arm shifted back another step, eyes darting to the crowd, to the man he nearly dragged off, to the phone cameras now recording his hesitation. He dropped his gaze, shame cutting deeper than any reprimand. The atmosphere flipped. Where earlier whispers had been complicit, now they were condemning. They tried to throw him out. Unbelievable. I can't believe I laughed. And then came the applause, hesitant at first. A single clap from the young man still holding his phone high. It echoed awkwardly across the teak, but it cracked the tension. Another followed, then another. Within seconds, scattered claps became a ripple became a wave, until the deck was filled with the unmistakable sound of solidarity. The hostess's face flushed crimson. She hissed at the manager, "Do something," but he couldn't. Authority had already slipped from his hands. Every move he had made was now evidence, archived in the eyes of guests, in the memory of devices, in the live feeds that had spread beyond the yacht. The older woman with silver hair raised her voice, shaking her head. "All this time, you treated him like a trespasser, and all this time, he was the one hosting us." Her words carried more weight than the hostess's entire performance. They drew nods, murmurs of agreement, even shame from those who had smirked earlier. The manager attempted one last defense, voice breaking. "We didn't know." The CEO finally turned fully toward him, gaze firm. "You didn't ask. You judged." The line landed like a gavel. closing arguments that needed no reply. Phones caught every second. The trembling hostess, the paling manager, the silence of a guard who had lost his orders, and the rising applause of guests who now understood the gravity of what they had witnessed. The tide had shifted fully. What began as spectacle at his expense had become a public reckoning, and none of the ones who mocked him had anywhere left to hide. The applause faded into a charged silence. All eyes remained on him, waiting, measuring, bracing for what he would do with the truth finally unmasked. The hostess still clutched her clipboard like it might reverse time. The manager's phone slipped slightly in his hand, betraying the sweat gathering at his palm. The man in the dark suit adjusted his cuff, a gesture as calm as it was final. Then he reached for his phone again. One tap. The same voice from earlier answered instantly. "Yes, sir, standing by." He didn't raise his tone. He didn't need to. The weight of quiet authority filled every gap on deck. "Terminate access for the event manager and the hostess. Effective immediately." A hush swept the deck. The manager blinked. You can't just—" "Terminate now," the CEO repeated, unshaken. "Yes, sir. Processing." The manager's phone buzzed in his hand. The screen flashed red. He tapped again and again, but each time an error message returned. Access revoked. His face paled further. The hostess fumbled with her earpiece, panic flooding her expression as static replaced the steady feed she once commanded. Her credentials, her authority, dissolved into silence. Gasps scattered through the crowd. Someone whispered, "He just shut them out." Another murmured, "That's real power." The guard stepped fully back now, no longer an enforcer but a bystander. His radio crackled once, then went dead, cut off from the chain of command that had ordered him forward minutes earlier. The CEO's gaze swept across them, hostess, manager, guard. You used your roles to strip dignity from someone you didn't bother to understand. Tonight, those roles end. The manager's voice cracked, desperate. "Please, there must be some way to—" "No," the CEO said simply. "Your way ended the moment you chose arrogance over respect." The hostess shook her head, stammering, I didn't know." "You didn't care to know." His words cut clean, leaving no ground to stand on. Phones caught every angle. The flush of humiliation, the collapse of false power, the unmistakable certainty in his command. Then he gave the final order. "Escort them off my yacht." The same security guard who had nearly dragged him moments ago now turned reluctantly, shifting his stance toward the hostess and manager. They protested, pleaded, sputtered excuses, but the crowd's eyes were merciless, the phones unblinking. Authority had flipped, irreversible and absolute. The older woman with silver hair shook her head as they were led toward the stairs. "This was justice," she murmured, her voice picked up by more than one recording phone. The CEO pocketed his own device once more. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. His stillness returned, heavier now, not the stillness of restraint, but of resolution. And as the footsteps of the disgraced faded down the deck, the night no longer belonged to humiliation. It belonged to consequence. The night had turned. Where once laughter rang at his expense, now silence bowed in his presence. The hostess and manager were gone, escorted down the steps, their authority stripped like masks at the end of a play. The guests, glittering in sequins and tuxedos, no longer whispered with doubt. They stared with recognition, with awe. The man in the dark suit walked back to the center of the deck. The ocean stretched behind him, black and endless, reflecting the golden lights of the yacht he had just reclaimed in front of them all. He lifted a glass from a passing tray, not offered to him, but taken, because it was always his to take. He raised it high. His voice carried clear, steady. "Respect is not a favor you give. It is the baseline. Deny it, and you deny yourself." Every head turned, every phone camera focused. "You measured me by what I wore, by what you assumed. But power isn't in the suit. It isn't in the champagne you snatched away. Power lives in truth, and truth doesn't ask for permission." The applause came slowly at first, then stronger, swelling until it roared across the deck, louder than the waves, louder than the music that faltered earlier. Guests who had doubted him clapped hardest. Those who had filmed now nodded with conviction. The young man who first raised his phone wiped his eyes before lifting it higher, whispering, "They need to hear this." The CEO lowered his glass, finishing softly but with finality. "Tonight, you tried to erase me, but I don't need a recording to prove who I am. I am the record, the result, the final line no one can rewrite." The wind caught his words and carried them across the water. The night no longer smelled of salt and champagne, it smelled of change. And in that charged silence, with the crowd applauding, with phones capturing a moment already destined to spread, the truth stood unshaken. He hadn't just survived their judgment. He had ended it.